So far, I've talked about telepathy on the level of emotions and connection. So basically, uh, what you could feel, what I could, feel. So being a cognitive empath and an emotional empath um, made me be, maybe not so much like everybody else. So I want to make sure that when I talk about telepathy, as I understand it, I need to make sure that you understand that's part of it. You have to be someone, and I was like this I can't remember not being like this. I can't remember not being me. And so the cognitive empathy is being able to just be detached, not emotionally detached, but just be able to take that observer view of what's going on around you, to just be able to watch what's happening. And as a child, you're just taking in everything. And a huge misconception is that kids aren't paying attention, or they don't understand you, or that they won't remember. And most of them probably won't. They will cover it up, put it down, because even in adulthood, taking that observer role and going back into childhood is almost impossible without some help, because they've not been able to compartmentalize things all their life. And I know when people talk about like compartmentalization and stuff, it's negative, but it doesn't have to be done negatively. It can be done lovingly. It can be done as a kid in the room going, "Oh, they're in a bad mood." And, and I did it not out of judgment. I did it out of survival. This is why children who have a lot of, I'm not going to say trauma, but they don't have anywhere they feel safe. They need to feel safe. So to feel safe, they pay attention to everything. They get hyper focused on everything around them. So if just me as an example, being a cognitive and emotional empath, I already understood people on the level that I could understand them. And so it wasn't so much about what was going on, it was about the energy. So, you're around some people and you just get tired, after you've talked to them, you need a nap. And they're not doing that on purpose. It's the dynamic, it's the interaction, it's the exchange of energy. And people just don't pay attention to it. But what I do know and what I have seen, and I can see things other people can't, um, is it's like I said in the other video, when you are your authentic self and other people start being their authentic self, you automatically help yourselves work on each other. So the whole Earth is a school concept, the lessons, we're here to learn lessons. Our souls, incarnate to, you know, work through karma and, all that good stuff. And so the energy is, now that I'm older, now that I'm grown, it's more about the energy exchange when you're interacting with people. There's a lot left unspoken because people aren't present when they're interacting with each other. And it's not a bad thing, but connection can be a lot better if you behave better. So that's why I swapped everything and just focused on doing human behavior workshops human behavior coaching and things like that. Because there's not anything that I can't talk about, especially if I have some knowing of it or some type of experience with it. Um, I can truly put myself in your shoes. And I don't mean that in a weird way, like I'm going to sympathize with your shoes once I put them on. I have compassion for your shoes because sympathy is born from guilt or obligation one. So to be sympathetic, you're feeling like you're obligated for the sympathy. You feel like you have to show some kind of emotion or you're guilted into it, right? People sympathy guilt. I mean, all the time. It's a narcissist's greatest tool, right? And so the um, the behavior that you see from other people, a lot of times, depending on if you're present or not, is really not about you, but about them. You'll notice if somebody calls you a name or something, it's like being on the playground at school. They're seeing something that, maybe triggers them or whatever. And, you know, that's what that is. And a lot of interactions go wrong because people think they know what the other person is thinking and they know what they mean. With telepathy, you don't know what they're thinking. You just know how they're feeling. And to really know somebody, like when you really get to know somebody, you'll you'll know what they would think about. You can tell by how they feel what they might say. And so that was something that actually was cultivated with me as a kid. So my dad and I and my grandfather, we were all heavy equipment operators. My grandfather was more of a politician than anything else, but I worked with my dad for several years, and he was actually my foreman. But when I was younger, he would say, "Well, what do you think?" If something would happen, and he'd say, "What do you think Jose would say about this?" And that was his mom, my grandmother, and I'd be like, "I don't think she'd like it." I don't think she'd say it's okay, or she'd like it, or she'd say this, or she'd say that. That is not that is not any kind of communication going on in real time. That was my little brain putting the character of my grandmother into the situation and trying to guess how she would react. And that helped with problem solving through my childhood. What would what would Nanny do? What would Paul do? Or you pick the character for the situation, right? If it's something that needed to get figured out, I would think like Nanny would think. If it was something I needed to get done or I needed to talk somebody into something, it would be what my pa would think because he was really good at that. He was just that type of person. Just everybody loved him. Kids were always around him. Type person. And my grandmother too. But my grandmother was very matter of fact, but she was also very funny um, because she just found humor in things because you might as well. And so I just want to make some clarification there about how I experience telepathy. It's not reading someone else's mind or being, in some sort of weird connection with them. It's knowing who they are as best you can know who they are, and just your brain doing a little processing. And my little brain never stopped doing that. The only thing I stopped doing was seeing things because everybody kept telling me they weren't there. But what I really did was programmed my way into seeing them without seeing them. It was a knowing. I cultivated just a knowing. And so when I was little, very little, my grandmother was just bright. I mean, she was a big woman anyway, but she was made of light. She was bright. I could hardly look at her. But she would be uh not bright and in human form. Not I'm not saying she changed forms, but she became less transparent and more solid. Um, when she was cooking or, when we were doing things, but when she was in her chair in the living room crocheting, she looked like an angel. And my grandfather constantly, who is this? What am I? Who are you? What is that? What would you do if this happened? He had all these little games we played. My brain was, you know, being engaged. I was problem solving. I was thinking, what if this happens? Who do you call if this happens? Who do you call if that happens? And so with all of that, we're always playing games. We're always sitting there. And he asked one time, well, what's Nanny? And I said, well, she's an angel. And, uh, and my grandmother just kind of giggled. And he said, no, she's not. And I said, yes, she is. Can you not see? When she's sitting in this chair, you can see her wings. And what it was when she was in that chair, she was at home and she was at peace. And was she an angel? I don't know, but she had wings. And so did my Uncle Mike. That's why I called him Uncle Mikey Bird, because he had wings. And somebody told me one day that you can't have wings until you died. So it was not possible for him to have wings because to have wings you have to be dead. And I told him, well, you need to talk to him about that because he's the one breaking the rules. And I just walked away. Arguing with me gets you nowhere. Um, I've been that way since I was born, but I am fair. But when you're a child, you're just a child. You're not being rude. You're not being mean. Just how I was, and nobody tried to change that. They didn't really argue with me, um, because my grandparents wouldn't let them. And it was just things that I could see back then. I recognize now as a form of energy. It's their causal body. People who can read auras, they're picking up on people's causal bodies. And now that I realize what that is, the sight, not being able to see it, is okay, because as a grown up, you've got too many other things to do. And so what I've been doing is just going back and trying to reconnect, not in the same way, but reconnect with the things that, I used to experience and see, and just to enjoy my memories for a minute. And it's helping me to be able to explain it as best I can. I'd love to be able to do it better, but unless you got a brain like mine, it's not going to work the same way. And I can't find another brain like mine. Um, after my dad passed away, that was the last brain like mine. If that makes any sense, it probably doesn't, but it does to me. And so telepathy is almost whatever you want to make it. You can connect to somebody to the point to where you can basically read their thoughts. You're not really reading their thoughts, but you're kind of reading their thoughts. But it's a two-way street. And you have to be um, settled. You have to be peaceful. You don't want a connection like that with somebody who's, you know, sporadic, emotional, just, constant. You need calm, you need peace. And if you're connected to something that's not peaceful, then that gets into your peace. So I'm not saying this to like warn you it's bad or whatever, but what I'm saying is it's yours. It's your brain and your choice to connect. Oops. So I hit the button, sorry. The game that I played in my head, my little video game I had going in my head. Um, this is just funny. My my grandfather would ask me to explain it to him. So basically, I had a truck that could drive itself. Had a dog named Flossie. I had a little thing of Jesus on the dashboard of the truck. The little plastic Jesus. Yeah, he was he was up on the dashboard, and let's see, and it was a truck, like it had a shifter, but it didn't have to be driven. It just knew where to. It knew how to get where I wanted to go. And we would just drive around the roads and visit, right? And so my grandfather's like, what is it? But let me go with you. Let me drive. I said, you don't have to drive, Paul. The truck drives itself. He was like, put me in there with you. And I said, okay. So when I would be experiencing it, right? When I would be thinking about it, it was like he was actually in there with me. And what he would do was he would be like, tell me, well, what are we coming up on here? What is this? Who are they? What are these like? And so I wasn't just, looking at things. I was, you know, interacting at this point. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that is. And, we'd go here and there and, I'd just make up places. And it was entertaining for him to just listen to how far my imagination could go. Okay. Because the truck got an upgrade, right? We had to put the shotgun again, in the back glass, right, of the truck. And I had a Bible in the glove box, just, and we had to get Jesus and take him with us when we got out of the truck. Anytime we got out of the truck, um, you had to take Jesus with you. He told me to always take Jesus with me in case we didn't know, who he's talking to. And so it was just um, fun. I mean, it was just something completely made up, completely mine. And the whole time, he's, you know, reading the newspaper or a magazine or something. I mean, he's listening to me, um, and just, let me enjoy myself, I guess. Just being a kid. And that's not telepathy. That's not, I don't know what that is. Um, that's just a kid and her grandfather, enjoying their time together. And I am very thankful that I can remember this, that I can go back and that I can pull this up and, remember riding around in my spaceship truck. So the videos going forward, I know that they'll kind of go away from telepathy and go back into the other things that I know now were abilities. Back then, I didn't see them as abilities because I didn't realize how special I really was. I had people tell me I was special all the time, and I also had them tell me I was crazy. So the understanding that I've gained, the knowledge and the knowing, um, and going back and understanding kind of what was happening in my childhood, at the time I did not. Um, I didn't really know, and if it wasn't a problem, you didn't pay attention to it, right? So that's how things fade away, right? If you ignore it, it'll go away. And what I was ignoring as I was older was, that it was there. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And so that's what I've been doing. That's another reason, no social media, no TV. It's a process and it's not easy and it's not anything that anybody could have helped me do. It's something that I had to do on my own, as myself, by myself, because in the end, all there is you. If you can't be alone, you're not in good company. If you can't, um, have constructive solitude, I'm going to stress constructive solitude, not just solitude where you're not working on yourself or not gaining any insights or getting any revelations. You're just rinsing and repeating every day. And I had the chance to do that recently. So I took advantage of it. I took something really shitty and turned it into something that's probably going to be okay. And all of us can do that. I truly believe that. It's all about honesty. It's about being honest with yourself and being honest with other people and recognizing when you're really being yourself or if you're just acting. Are you really happy or are you just acting like you're happy? That simple question right there is pretty good. That'll get you a start. I did a little video earlier today about the Truman Show, calling it the True Man Show, and just a little, just a little thing to put out there about how we're kind of all in our own Truman Show. And going through the awakening process is kind of like when Truman figured out that everybody around him was just acting. Um, it wasn't so much that that reality wasn't real, but that his reality wasn't. And then he had to figure out how to, you know, like, who are you if everybody around you is just acting and you're, have you been acting? I mean, that would be a huge just identity crunch right there. But also a wonderful opportunity to wake up to that fact consciously and just start realizing when you're actually being yourself and when you're acting. And if you have to change who you are every time you go to work or go to the store or go here, or let's say you're around this group of people, so you're acting this way, that group of people, you act that way, you will end up with a huge identity crisis, or you won't. It's up to you, like to wake up to, everything that's going on around you and try to get back to who you are at your core is a very personal and individual process. The outside influences, the people around you, you will start to either act like or become the five people that you spend the most time with. That personality that you're constantly interacting with will bleed over onto you and you to them if you have a strong personality. And it's not bad. It's how we've taught ourselves to survive. Just like when we were kids, we acted this way at church, we acted this way at home, and I acted the same way everywhere. At church, I would sit under the pulpit. Preacher Dixon would preach, and I would just sit under the pulpit and just look at him and take my foot and tear the ruffles off of my dresses because the ruffles itched me. Like everything, skin, everything, so sensitive, which all kids are. But I didn't like the ruffles, and I guess in my little mind, if I was sitting up under the preacher doing it, I wouldn't get in trouble. I don't know. But I did like sitting there and just watching him. And so when it was time for me to really sit down and remember who I am, it was liberating and frustrating at the same time to realize that I've never been anything but who I am, but I have pretended to be many things that I'm not. And even in the course of that, I can look back on my life and take full responsibility for exactly where I am right now. Every choice I made, every wrong decision, a lot of wrong decisions, um, but they're mine. They're my mistakes, but it's my life, and I would like to own it. So I own my life and the story that goes along with it. Because when you know who you are and you've got the guts not to let anybody else try to tell you any different, when it comes time to work on yourself, all you got to do is remember. You just got to go back and remember. And sometimes memories are painful. And sometimes memories keep people alive. And I will save that story for tomorrow. Till next time.